welcome to your Chapter 4 mini lecture on job satisfaction. Up until this point in the course module, we have covered one theory of job satisfaction, and that is value percept theory. So in a nutshell, value percept theory says there are 5 facets associated with job satisfaction, and if there is a good match between what the person values and what the job provides, there will be job satisfaction. But of the facets that are covered, there's actually one that is particularly important for job satisfaction. And looking here, this graphic actually comes right from your textbook. You can see that if we look at the overall correlation with the job satisfaction, overall job satisfaction, and then we look at that relationship with the specific facets described in value percept theory, the work itself is correlated with overall job satisfaction at 0.70. So this is a very strong positive relationship. So what that is saying is the work itself, what employees are asked to do, is driving their job satisfaction more so than what we pay them or who they're working with. So the next theory that we are going to cover is called job characteristics theory. And job characteristics theory really dives into the work itself to determine what is it about the work itself that is satisfying or is not satisfying. So with job characteristics theory, this theory is basically saying there are 3 psychological states that satisfying work creates. So if a job is satisfying, it will produce these psychological states within employees. So the first one is called meaningfulness of work. Essentially, employees are asking themselves, does the work count for something? Is the work that I'm doing important? So they might ask, does the work that I'm doing benefit society in some kind of way? Does the work that I'm doing provide some kind of positive outcomes for other people? Essentially, why am I doing the work that I'm doing? You might consider right now all of the essential workers that are continuing to be employed during COVID. I would certainly suspect that they have a high degree of meaningfulness of work because society is really counting on them to help keep everyone else going during these really difficult times. The second psychological state that should be created for satisfying work is called responsibility for outcomes. So this is when an individual is looking at whether or not their individual efforts, the individual behaviors that they're doing, does it make a difference? So essentially, at the end of the day, when we look at how the unit or my department or my organization is doing, can I trace any of those results, any of that success back to me and to the work that I'm doing? If an individual feels like the work they are doing really has no bearing on the rest of the organization's success or the rest of their unit's success, it might start to feel as if their individual efforts are kind of getting lost in the shuffle and aren't really producing anything. The third psychological state that should be derived from satisfying work is called knowledge of results. And essentially, this says that employees want to know how well they are doing. So it's not enough to do the work or even do meaningful work, but rather employees need to know if they are performing certain tasks well, if there's an opportunity for them to continue to improve. So imagine that you are in a course and you are submitting work week after week, but you honestly have no idea if you're doing a good job or if there's areas where you need to improve. Without that feedback, it's really hard to feel satisfied with the job that you're doing. And the same logic holds for employees and organizations. So again, we are focused on job characteristics theory, and we're saying that when work is satisfying, it will create these three psychological states. Okay, on the next page, we're going to flip-flop these psychological states, and they are now going to appear on the left-hand side of your screen. So meaningfulness of work, responsibility for outcomes, knowledge of results. We just talked about these psychological states. Now what we're going to do is identify specific characteristics of jobs that are then associated with each of these psychological states. And I'll give you an example, of course, of each one. So we're going to start by this idea of meaningfulness of work. So how do we create the psychological state that one's job is meaningful? Well, according to job characteristics theory, there are actually three characteristics or factors associated with meaningful jobs. And these are task variety, task identity, and task significance. We're going to start by talking about task variety. And then we'll talk about identity and then significance. And then we'll go into responsibility for outcomes, which is associated with the job characteristic of autonomy. And then we'll talk about knowledge of results, which is associated with the job characteristic of feedback. Okay, so again, we're going to start up here by describing how do we create meaningful work. And we do so by focusing on these three job characteristics. So the first is called task variety. So here's just a nice little cartoon to ease you in. It says, by the 5th year, Jim really regretted following his childhood passion for ice cream. So even when a job looks like it could be fun, if you're doing the same thing over and over, day in, day out, it can get old, and that, of course, does not feel very satisfying to employees. So task variety essentially is looking at the number of different activities, skills, or talents that an employee needs to use or needs to have in order to complete the job. So if we're going to create meaningful work, these jobs are exciting, they're different, they're challenging. So we're asking individuals to complete multiple different kinds of tasks. We're asking them to use a variety of different skills, and the work is going to be challenging what they know how to do, and it's going to be pushing them. So basically, jobs feel different. Every day you walk into the workplace and you have a different set of tasks to do, and the variety of tasks keeps the work interesting and engaging. Meaningful jobs are not, however, monotonous or repetitious. So if we ask somebody to just taste ice cream over and over and over again, that can feel very old very quickly, and there isn't any variety really in that job at all. And so this feeling of doing the same thing over and over can get very dissatisfying for employees. So I'm just going to show you all a quick clip here. I'm going to click, it's a video about what it's like to work at Pringles. And so it's just a minute or two long, but I want you to consider task variety and how that applies to this video here. Okay, and this is from the show How It's Made. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but here we'll just watch this real quick.
Create a mushy paste. The mushy paste goes down the tubes, down the rollers, and it gets flattened out with water to make a nice sheet of pastry.
The pastry is then crisped by this spinning crisper. It chops crisps all day long.
It's beautiful.
The non-crisped pastry is tugged away, leaving nothing but crisp.
And of course, this bit, they just put that in the bin. They don't reuse it. It can't be bothered.
No, it is scrunched up, mushed into a ball, and thrown in the bin like a basketball style.
And this bit, I believe they're going to get their shape like a platypus.
Yes, here's the platypus template. You can see how it fits in there. Here's 6 of them.
Now here's the machine spinning, making more.
Thing about Pringles is you need hundreds of them. Every single day, day after day, endless relentless. Oh my god!
And this is beautiful. Look, they're putting them in stacks, and then the man, he has to fix them because the machine isn't quite perfect. They need to pay someone to fix the machine's job. It's terrible.
Yes, and their job description is Pringle Patter, because that's all they do all day. Pat the Pringles.
And sometimes when they're damaged, he just eats it. You know?
Yes, it's a perk of the job.
They don't actually give you any dinner break because you eat the Pringles.
Exactly. He gets home from work and Clive, his best friend, says, "What'd you do at work today?" And he says, "Oh, you know, Paddy Pringles."
And sometimes I might even bring him home a bag of Pringles.
Pringles don't come in bags.
You know, he had a little bag.
Okay, so again, this is just a good, let's see, I'm so sorry, let me get out of here. Perfect. Okay, so but here we are back to screen. So that's just a good example of what it would look like to work at a job that is the same day in, day out. All you're getting paid to do is just pat Pringles, which I think sounds like a nice break, perhaps for a day or a week. But imagine doing that kind of work for months, for years. It would get really old, and that, of course, is not satisfying. The second component that creates meaningful work is called task identity. And essentially, this characteristic is whether or not someone is responsible for completing whole pieces of work from beginning to end with a visible outcome. So essentially, we are looking at whether or not a person gets to complete the whole process from the start of a project to the end of a project. Or are they only responsible for certain chunks within that process? So, meaningful jobs will allow an employee to take ownership of a process. From start to finish, they get to oversee the entire work situation, and this will allow someone to complete the job from start to finish. So, they get to oversee the ins and outs and all of the intricacies from beginning to end. Importantly, this allows employees to see the finished product of their work. So you can imagine someone who works on an assembly line, say at a car manufacturing plant. If their job is only to put the car seats in, they are not completing a whole piece of work, right? They're not building the entire car such that they get to see the car at the end. All they're doing is putting the seats in and then sending the project or the car along to the next station or next group of employees who will then put the next component on the car. So that type of work would really lack task identity. In my own work experiences, I used to work in sales at a hotel, and my job was to go out and get clients and book them. So get them to want to have weddings or corporate events or meetings at our hotel. But once those individuals booked their meeting, they were then passed on to someone else who would handle all of the details of the event and then would actually oversee the event itself. So even though I had an important job of trying to get new clients, I actually never knew how the events turned out or whether or not they were satisfied at the end because the work got broken up across employees. So according to job characteristics theories, we can actually make work more satisfying when we allow individuals to complete the whole process. So in the example of my sales manager experience, actually would probably be more satisfying if we divided work such that one person booked the meeting, actually signed the contract, completed the catering, oversaw the event, and so they might do fewer of those, but they would oversee the entire process, and that would make the work more enjoyable. The third characteristic that makes work meaningful is called task significance. And essentially, this is looking at the impact that the job has on the lives of other people. So if I were to ask you, what kind of jobs are significant? You might initially think of jobs like doctors, teachers, nurses. Oftentimes we might think of firefighters. These jobs that really help other individuals. But there are also a lot of jobs that help society and help individuals, but don't necessarily get as much notoriety, so to speak. So, for example, think about individuals that work collecting trash and garbage. I mean, they really fulfill an important role in society, even though that might not be the top of our mind when we think about jobs that are meaningful. And so, as managers, it's our job to help employees understand why their jobs are important, what significance they have. So you can look at this. I like this graphic because on one hand, someone's saying, I'm laying bricks, right? I'm just putting these bricks together, no big deal, versus someone else says, I'm building a cathedral. So a lot of times it's just how we frame the tasks that people are doing by telling them how important they are and what good they're doing can really help to improve their overall job satisfaction. Just as another example, there was a research study that was done and it looked at individuals who worked collecting donations. So they were supposed to call individuals and collect donations for a university. And so with one group of employees, they basically just made their phone calls, asked people for money, and that was kind of the end of it. But with the other group, they were told what their money that they were collecting was actually going to do. So when they were able to collect donations, they were then told how that money was going to go to helping the university build new buildings or invest in new programs. And so it's no surprise that when employees had knowledge of how they were making a difference on how that money was being collected and helping the university, they had much higher job satisfaction and actually performed at a higher level. So again, as a manager, it's our job to really frame an employee's work role and to show them the difference that they're making because it might not feel obvious to them at the outset. So we've just covered task variety, task identity, and task significance. As a reminder, these three job characteristics produce work that is more meaningful for employees. We're now moving into that second psychological state, which is responsibility for outcomes. So if we want to create this psychological state of having responsibility for outcomes, we're focused on this job characteristic called autonomy. And autonomy is the degree to which a job provides freedom, independence, and discretion. And so with discretion, we mean whether or not an individual gets to make some decisions about the work and how the work gets done. So with autonomy, employees that have high levels of autonomy are going to have control over the timing of their work, the scheduling and sequencing of work activities. What this means is they can decide when they're going to do work and in what order they're going to do it. So maybe they come to the office and they answer emails, check their voicemail, draft up a proposal, respond to more emails, and then meet with clients. Alternatively, another person might come in and draft their proposal, meet with clients, and then do work emails and check voicemails. So with autonomy, we say to employees, we just want the work to get done, but you choose in what order you're going to get the work done. As an example of this, Best Buy and Gap actually used to have these programs where they would say to employees, you can do your job if you work in the corporate office, and we don't care when you do it as long as you put in your 40 hours a week. So employees could work overnight, they could come in very early in the morning, they could take longer lunch breaks, whatever it is, as long as you worked 40 hours, they didn't care when you did so. And this gives employees more flexibility and again, just a feeling of freedom of having control and responsibility over the work. A second part of autonomy, though, is not just the order in which work gets done, but being able to choose how to complete the task. So what methods or procedures are you going to use to complete the work efficiently? As another example of my time as a hotel sales manager, when I first started, my boss had us do 40 different sales activities each week. And so it was mapped out that we were to make something along the lines of 20 phone calls, we should do 10 offsite visits, we should have 5 clients coming to the hotel, and then we should also have 5 email marketing emails that we would send out. So that was kind of how I was hired in, and each week we would do those things. But then over time, my boss actually said, I'm going to try something new. You can do whatever you want to do for the week. So you just need to have 40 sales activities, but you decide what those activities look like. So suddenly you could make 40 phone calls. You could go off site and make 40 visits to other potential clients. You could have 40 people come to the hotel and do 40 tours. We typically did a mix and a match, but this allowed us to figure out what worked best for our selling method, how were we most effective at getting clients, and pursue those methods rather than trying to just fit certain quotas. So in doing this, in allowing employees to have control over how they do the work, it gives them more sense of autonomy, and that increases their feeling of job satisfaction. And then the last psychological state that we talked about is this idea of knowledge of results and whether or not employees know if they're doing a good job. And so the job characteristic associated with knowledge of results is called feedback. Now, I'm going to put this here. The way we talk about feedback in job characteristics theory is not the same way that we talk about feedback in everyday language. So you really need to pay attention to this definition, because when it comes time to apply this concept, a lot of students often do so inaccurately. So when we're talking about feedback, we are talking about the degree to which the job itself provides feedback about how the employee is performing. Feedback does not come from a manager. Feedback does not come from other employees. Simply by doing the job should tell an employee if they are doing it well or not doing it well. So I'm going to give you an example. Consider the job of a construction worker. Okay? How might a construction worker know if they are doing the job well? Well, typically they know if they've done the job well because the building gets built, right? At one time there was no building and now there is a building. Or at one time there was a rickety bridge that was falling down and now the bridge is reinforced and it's structurally sound and the project is complete. So the construction worker doesn't need feedback from the supervisor or from the coworker to know that they did a good job, because they can look at the building and say, oh yeah, that building is standing. We know we did a good job. You might also consider a doctor. So how might a doctor know if they are doing a good job? Well, for one, their patients might feel better. So if you go to a doctor and you're having a complaint or an ailment and the doctor gives you a prescription, and you're feeling better, that's how the doctor knows they did a good job. They don't necessarily need a supervisor to say, you did a good job. They can see it in their clients who are now back to having good health. Or perhaps if someone is a surgeon and your client, your patients, make it through surgery and they're feeling better and they're healthy and alive at the end. I mean, that's a really good indicator that you are doing a good job as a surgeon. If you are a surgeon and most of your patients pass away during the operations, that might be an indication that something's not going well. And so here it's the doing of the work and doing it successfully that allows an employee to have feedback. And then lastly, we can consider being a lawyer. And so how would you know if you are a good lawyer? You probably know you're a good lawyer if you're winning your cases. So if you take on cases and every single time you go to court you lose, that might be some kind of feedback that you aren't necessarily the best lawyer out there, right? And customers might not want to hire you if they see that you're not winning in court. So again, what each of these jobs have in common is that just by doing the work and by evaluating the results of the work, an employee can figure out whether or not they are doing a good job. The feedback does not come from a supervisor or from a coworker. And I just underscore that because a lot of students tend to mix that up. And so I want to make sure that that distinction is clear in your mind. Okay, and so we're just going to cover two more slides. and then I'll turn you back to the rest of the module. So far, what job characteristics theory is telling us is that when we create jobs that have high amounts of variety, identity, autonomy, when we give high amounts of feedback and high significance, these types of jobs are going to be more satisfying than jobs that are low in autonomy, low in variety, low in identity, etc. So just from an organizational standpoint, we can make jobs more satisfying by increasing these job characteristics. However, there are going to be two conditions where increasing these job characteristics will result in even greater job satisfaction. Okay, so there's going to be two conditions where increasing the job characteristics results in even greater job satisfaction. So the first of these is knowledge and skill. So what this means is if we are going to make jobs have more variety, if we're going to make jobs have more identity, we need to ensure that our employees have the knowledge and skill to now do these jobs that have greater tasks or do the job from start to finish. So if we go back to thinking about the car manufacturing example, if all you were trained to do was put in car seats, but suddenly we want to make your job satisfying and we say you're now going to build the whole car, you might not actually feel more satisfied if you don't know how to build the whole car. So before we can just go changing the job characteristics, we need to make sure that we've fully trained our employees and that they have the knowledge and skill required to complete those tasks. So we have to ask, do employees know how to do their job? If we make changes, will they know how to implement the new changes? Do employees have the skills they need, or might they need some additional training? So yes, we want to make jobs more satisfying, but to do so might require us to provide more training or just refreshing of skills to ensure that our employees aren't frustrated, but are rather excited and capable and competent to complete those new tasks. The second factor that will determine whether or not changing job characteristics actually results in increased job satisfaction is this idea of growth need strength. Growth need strength is an individual personality trait, and essentially it's this idea that some employees have a desire to continue to grow over time. They want continued development, they want to learn how to do new things, and these people are most satisfied when they have the opportunity to keep learning. So we might consider employees who have high growth need strength to be employees who are lifelong learners. And some of you might really relate to this feeling. So if employees have a desire to grow and to learn and to keep learning new skills, by changing their job characteristics and giving them more variety and giving them more autonomy, that's really going to improve their job satisfaction. However, if an employee doesn't desire to keep growing, right? They finished their training or they finished their college degree and they've got their job and they just want to do that job. There's nothing wrong with that, and they might just want to keep doing that one job and don't really have a desire to keep learning new things or taking on new skill sets or tasks. So we need to take that into account before we just go changing any job characteristics. So we have to ask ourselves, do employees have a desire to grow and improve? If the answer is yes, then we should make changes and ensure that those job characteristics are high, right, on all 5 of those dimensions. Do employees want to develop their skills and talents? Again, we need to ask ourselves, is there a desire among the employees to keep strengthening their talents and learning new skills? If they say yes, then we can keep stretching those job characteristics. But if an employee doesn't want to learn and grow over time, then changing their job tasks, changing them to have more variety, or having them complete the process now from start to finish might actually feel dissatisfying to them. So it's our job as managers to know our employees individually and then make changes based on those individual characteristics. So we can change the job characteristics for employees who have this growth need strength, and maybe leave the job characteristics alone for employees that don't have the growth need strength. As we mentioned way back in chapter 1, these factors here, knowledge and skill and growth need strength, these are called moderating variables. So they are changing the strength of the relationship between job characteristics and job satisfaction. So when an employee has the knowledge and skills to do the job, the relationship between job characteristics and job satisfaction becomes even greater. When employees have high growth need strength, the relationship between job characteristics and job satisfaction is even greater. If you have any questions about what a moderating variable is or how these two factors are important to job characteristics theory, please let me know. Okay, this is our last slide that basically just summarizes everything we just talked about. So we have satisfaction with the work itself. We can create satisfaction with the work itself by promoting these 3 psychological states. And each of these psychological states is associated with a specific type of job characteristic. So by changing the job characteristics, we can promote the psychological state, and that, of course, can then increase satisfaction with the work itself, which will increase job satisfaction. In addition, we can make these relationships even stronger by assessing our employees' knowledge and skills to make sure they actually have what's needed to complete the job, and by assessing their growth need strength to ensure that they actually want to develop their skill sets over time. And if they do want to develop those skills and keep growing over time, that's going to strengthen this relationship between the job characteristics and the satisfaction with the work itself. Okay, so that's all we have for our lecture today on job satisfaction and job characteristics theory. If you have any questions, please send me an email. Please come to office hours. Happy to help you work through the content. All right, everyone, have a great day. Bye.